Welcome back to the Bread of Life Chronicles. I'm Janice, and today we're diving into Genesis 5. Our journey through Genesis so far has taken us from the creation of the world, the first family, and the ripple effects of their choices. Last time in chapter 4, we examined Cain's tragic choices. The first murder, his exile, and the difficult legacy he left. Today, as we explore Genesis 5, we'll see a powerful contrast between two family lines, one that turned further away from God, and the other that sought to walk after him. This chapter invites us to reflect on the impact of our choices, the legacy we pass on, and the hope of redemption for humanity. In our last video, we reflected on the consequences of Cain's actions, his jealousy that led to him murdering his brother Abel, and from that point, we see his family line marked by separation from God. His descendants exhibited characteristics of rebellion and violence, culminating in Lamech's boastful murder and disregard for life. Genesis 4 revealed how far humanity can fall when disconnected from God. Today, in contrast, we'll explore what happens when families intentionally seek a relationship with God. In Genesis 5, we witness a family tree that shrewdly contrasts with the family tree described in chapter 4. On the one side, Cain's descendants illustrate a line driven by human will, violence, and distance from God, producing a legacy tainted by bloodshed and pride. In stark contrast, Seth's line shows a return to reverence, a calling on God's name, and a legacy of faith. This chapter not only draws a sharp comparison to chapter 4 that highlights the cost of a life without God, but also highlights the hope of restoration and closeness with God. Genesis 5 records the genealogy of Adam's descendants through Seth. After Abel's death, Adam and Eve had a son named Seth, who would comfort them in the loss of their son Abel. His line marked the point where men began to see God by proclaiming the name of the Lord. This chapter unfolds with a series of generations, tracing the faithfulness of those who came from Seth's line. Here we see Enoch, who walked so closely with God that he did not die. God took him. He was taken by God. Imagine that. Verse 21 to 24 says, Enoch lived 65 years and begot Methuselah. After he begot Methuselah, Enoch walked with God 300 years and had sons and daughters. So all the days of Enoch were 365 years, and Enoch walked with God, and he was not, for God took him. Enoch's example stands in direct contrast to the violence in Cain's line, where Lamech's pride, wickedness, and disregard for God further distanced them from God. On the one hand, Cain's offspring Lamech, following in Cain's footsteps, continues the legacy of wickedness and widens the separation from God. He doesn't even regard God in his wickedness and pride. He was a law unto himself. He doesn't personally judge his murdering someone as being wrong. He's more concerned about being found out and being killed. I believe Adam and Eve, seeing the disastrous effects of Cain and suffering the loss of two sons, along with their exile from the life they were born into, makes a conscious decision to train Seth on the importance and the need of calling on the name of the Lord. Seth's line results in Enoch, who walked so closely with God that he took him. He did not experience the curse humanity inherited from Adam, death. Let's reflect on a few key points. Firstly, as just mentioned, Adam and Eve seem to have made a concerted effort to raise Seth differently. Having seen the consequences of a life apart from God in Cain, they encouraged a return to calling on the name of the Lord and honoring his ways. Their experiences remind us that we too can find redemption and a fresh start in seeking God, regardless of our past and the importance of raising a family that honors and serves God. Seth's descendants show a pattern of faith, especially in Enoch, who exemplifies the profound closeness humans can achieve with God when they live righteously. Enoch's walk with God is so remarkable that unlike his ancestors, he does not face death. Instead, he is taken directly by God. This stands in stark contrast to the self-reliant, violent lives of Cain's descendants, who lived without the blessings of God's presence. Enoch saw Adam and Eve and Seth's lives and heard the stories of Cain and Abel, and likely heard what Lamech had done. So when his son was born, he said, "Not on my watch." He walked so remarkably with God so that he would set an example for his son, Methuselah. For reference, Adam was 687 years old when Enoch's son Methuselah was born, and Enoch began walking with God. Seth, Enoch's father, was 557 years old at that time. Both Adam and Seth were still alive. Let that sink in. Adam died at 930 years old and Seth at 912. Cain's line reveals the degradation that comes from turning away from God. His descendants, notably Lamech, lived by their own rules, embracing polygamy, violence, and prideful independence from God. Cain aligns himself with the kingdom of Satan and starts a family line that perpetuates this in the city he built. Here's the thing. Cain could have decided to begin calling on the name of the Lord because he saw what his actions brought, and also because of his close proximity with God before going into exile. He could have decided to begin heeding God's warning to rule over sin and to raise a family that called on the name of the Lord. We see here through the two family lines the first picture of the kingdom of darkness and the kingdom of light, and the stark difference. The life and Seth line, in contrast, speaks to the peace and closeness with God that can only come through obedience and faith. Through Enoch's example, we see that it is possible to live a life that is pleasing to God, even in a broken world. This chapter closes with the birth of Noah, whose father prophesies that Noah will bring relief from the curse placed on the ground, a reminder of the hopeful future even in the midst of hardship. Noah's father, which was Enoch's grandson, was referring to the curse in Genesis 3, verses 17 to 19. God said to Adam, "Cursed is the ground for your sake. In toil you will eat of it all the days of your life. Both thorns and thistles it will bring forth for you. In the sweat of your face you will eat bread." He was looking to God in hope that God, who didn't allow his grandfather to die, despite the sentence that man would return to the dust of the earth in Genesis 3, would do something about the hardship they were experiencing with producing food from the ground by the sweat of their brow. Unlike Cain's line, where violence perpetuated violence, Seth's lineage begins to look forward and believe and hope in God's restoration. Enoch's grandson Noah's dad says this in verse 29. "And he called his name Noah, saying, This one will comfort us concerning our work and the toil of our hands, because of the ground which the Lord has cursed." What a beautiful picture of a family living in independence and communion and faith in God. Such an eye-opener for me to recognize this in contrast from the beginning, that no matter what the culture or the time period, or whether there are modern-day distractions or not, the result is the same. A family raised to reverence and walk with God yields a godly heritage and blessings from the Lord. Now let's shift our focus a bit. As we consider these opposing legacies, I invite you to take a moment for a guided meditation with me. Find a quiet place to settle in. Close your eyes. Take a few deep breaths. Breathe in. Let go of any tension you might be feeling from your day. Breathe out. Be still before God in quietness and calmness. In quietness and calmness shall be your strength. Imagine two paths lay before you. One path reflects a life lived independently of God, a path where desires and self-will leads the way. Self-will leading the way even at the expense of others, yielding both seemingly productive fruit and evil fruit. Now picture the other path, a life of communion with God, where walking faithfully brings peace, purpose, and hope. As you stand at the crossroads, ask yourself this: which legacy am I building in my own life and family's life? What choices are you making that will shape the generations to come? I'll pause here for you to think on that. I invite you to take a moment to reflect with me further on the following questions. How does the life you're living today impact those around you and the generations who will come after you? In what ways can you invite God to be at the center of your decisions and actions, shaping a legacy of faith and hope? I'll pause here for a moment for you to reflect on that. How can you, like Enoch, seek to walk with God in a way that transcends the brokenness of this world? Now let's make it sticky. As you reflect on today's theme, I encourage you to get your notebooks out and journal about what kind of legacy you want to leave. What steps can you take to ensure that your life points others towards faith and hope in God? In closing, Genesis 5 offers us a profound reminder of the legacies we build. We see the consequences of life without God in Cain's line and the beauty of a faithful walk with God in Seth's lineage. In a world where brokenness can feel overwhelming, the stories of Enoch and Noah's father reminds us that a life pleasing to God is possible, and that faithfulness to God can inspire hope in God for generations to come. If today's reflection spoke to you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. And how do you see the legacy you're building? And how can you walk in a way that brings you closer to God? Also, I have included a free tool in the description below that is designed to help you grow in grace and intimacy with God, and also to help you build a legacy of faith. Please feel free to click on the link below to download and use the free tool as you seek to grow closer to God each day. I look forward to continuing our journey through Genesis. So until next time, keep reflecting and seeking to walk closer to God and honoring Him each day.